Imagine waking up on Manhattan Island more than 200 years ago. It's the year 1800. There are no skyscrapers piercing the clouds, no flashing billboards, no yellow taxis rushing through busy streets. Instead, you see muddy roads winding between small wooden houses. Horses pull wagons loaded with goods, while sailing ships gently rock in the harbor. The air smells of salt water, fresh timber, and smoke rising from nearby fireplaces. At first glance, this feels like just another small coastal town. The entire city is home to fewer than 80,000 people, less than the number of fans that can fill a modern football stadium. Life moves at a slower pace. Merchants greet one another in open-air markets. Fishermen prepare their boats before sunrise. Children play in narrow streets where today's towering skyscrapers will one day stand. Nothing about this quiet settlement suggests it will become one of the most recognizable cities on Earth. Yet within the next 2 centuries, New York will rise from a modest trading port into the financial, cultural, and architectural capital of the modern world. How did that happen? The answer isn't a single invention, one leader, or one lucky event. It is the story of bold ideas, relentless ambition, millions of immigrants chasing a better life, and a city that never stopped reinventing itself. To understand New York's rise, we first need to understand why this island mattered in the first place. Manhattan's greatest advantage wasn't its size, it was its location. Surrounded by deep natural waters, its harbor allowed ships from Europe, the Caribbean, and the American coastline to dock safely throughout much of the year. Long before skyscrapers defined its skyline, the harbor defined its future. Every arriving ship carried more than cargo. It brought new ideas, new cultures, skilled workers, and ambitious merchants searching for opportunity. Trade quickly became the heartbeat of the growing city. If you're fascinated by how cities, countries, and civilizations transformed through history, make sure to subscribe. Every week, we'll travel back in time to uncover the stories that shaped our world. Now, back to New York. In 1800, New York still wasn't America's most important city. Philadelphia held greater political influence. Boston remained a powerful center of commerce and education. Few people could have predicted that New York would soon leave them both behind. Then, just 25 years later, everything changed. Hundreds of miles north of Manhattan, workers completed one of the greatest engineering projects in American history, a canal. At first glance, it didn't seem like something capable of changing the destiny of an entire city, but that canal would transform New York forever. The project was called the Erie Canal. When construction began in 1817, many people believed it was impossible. Digging a waterway more than 360 miles across forests, swamps, and rocky terrain sounded like a dream too ambitious for a young nation. Critics mocked it as Clinton's ditch, convinced it would become one of America's greatest failures. But 8 years later, the impossible became reality. In 1825, the Erie Canal officially opened, creating a direct water route between the Great Lakes and the Atlantic Ocean through New York. At first glance, it was just a canal. In reality, it rewrote the future of an entire city. Before the canal, moving goods across the country was slow, expensive, and often dangerous. A farmer in the American Midwest had little chance of reaching international markets. But suddenly, grain, timber, furs, and countless other products could travel thousands of miles by water at a fraction of the previous cost. Almost every shipment passed through New York. The city's harbor became busier than ever. Warehouses appeared along the waterfront. Merchants expanded their businesses. Banks financed new industries. Shipbuilders struggled to keep up with demand. Money flowed into New York faster than anyone had imagined. And where opportunity grows, people follow. Throughout the 1800s, hundreds of thousands of immigrants crossed the Atlantic searching for a better life. Many arrived with little more than a suitcase, a few coins, and hope for the future. For millions, New York became their first glimpse of America. The city's population exploded. In 1800, fewer than 80,000 people lived here. By the middle of the century, that number had grown several times over. Neighborhoods expanded almost overnight. Streets stretched farther north. New homes, shops, schools, and factories appeared wherever land was available. The sounds of dozens of languages filled the streets as Irish laborers, German craftsmen, Italian families, Jewish merchants, and people from countless other backgrounds built new lives side by side. New York wasn't just growing larger. It was becoming one of the most diverse cities the world had ever seen. But success created a new problem. Manhattan is an island. Unlike many other cities, it couldn't keep expanding forever. Land became increasingly valuable. Every empty lot disappeared. Every block grew more crowded. Soon, the city faced a question that would change architecture forever. If it couldn't grow outward, could it grow upward? The answer would reshape not only New York's skyline, but skylines around the world. The idea sounded almost impossible. For thousands of years, cities had spread outward. When they ran out of space, they simply expanded into the surrounding countryside. But Manhattan didn't have that luxury. It was surrounded by water. Every year, more businesses arrived. More families settled. More factories opened. Land prices climbed higher and higher, making every square foot of the island more valuable than the last. The only direction left to build was up. For centuries, that would have been impossible. Heavy stone buildings could only rise so high before collapsing under their own weight. But during the late 19th century, two inventions changed everything. The first was the steel frame. Unlike thick stone walls, a steel skeleton could support enormous buildings while remaining surprisingly light. The second was the safety elevator. Suddenly, reaching the 10th, 20th, or even 30th floor became practical. What had once been the least desirable floors because of the long climb now offered the best views in the city. New York was about to rewrite the rules of architecture. At the same time, another engineering masterpiece transformed everyday life. In 1883, after 14 years of construction, the Brooklyn Bridge opened to the public. Thousands of people crossed it on opening day, amazed by a bridge unlike anything they had ever seen. Stretching across the East River, it connected Brooklyn and Manhattan more efficiently than ever before, allowing workers, families, and businesses to move freely between the two growing communities. The bridge became more than a transportation link. It became a symbol of New York's ambition. As the city entered the 20th century, innovation accelerated. In 1904, New York opened its first underground subway line. For the first time, millions of people could travel quickly beneath the crowded streets. Neighborhoods that once felt distant suddenly became part of the city's daily rhythm. Workers no longer had to live within walking distance of their jobs. Businesses could reach a much larger workforce. Entire communities expanded almost overnight. The city wasn't just growing, it was becoming faster. Then came the race that would define New York forever. The race to touch the sky. Developers competed to build taller than anyone else. One skyscraper after another pushed higher into the clouds, each trying to claim the title of the world's tallest building. In 1931, during one of the darkest economic periods in American history, New York completed a structure that would become a global icon, the Empire State Building. Rising 1,250 feet above Manhattan, it wasn't simply another office tower. It became a symbol of confidence, resilience, and the belief that even during hardship, New York would continue reaching higher than anyone thought possible. By now, the quiet trading town of 1800 had completely disappeared. In its place stood a city unlike any the world had ever seen. But no city rises forever without facing challenges. Just as New York reached extraordinary heights, it was tested again and again. In 1929, the stock market crashed, triggering the Great Depression. Businesses closed, unemployment soared, and millions of Americans struggled to survive. Yet even during those difficult years, New York refused to stop building. The completion of the Empire State Building in 1931 became more than an architectural achievement. It became a symbol of determination during one of the nation's darkest moments. After World War II, New York entered another golden era. Its skyline continued to expand. Wall Street became the heart of global finance. Broadway entertained millions. Artists, musicians, filmmakers, and writers turned the city into one of the world's cultural capitals. If something happened in New York, the rest of the world paid attention. But by the 1970s, the city's success began to fade. Crime rates climbed. Entire neighborhoods fell into decline. The city faced a severe financial crisis, and at one point, New York came dangerously close to bankruptcy. Many wondered whether its greatest days were already behind it. Yet once again, New York proved remarkably resilient. Throughout the 1980s and 1990s, businesses returned, neighborhoods were revitalized, and tourism flourished. Millions of people from around the world continued arriving with the same dream that had drawn immigrants here for generations. Then came September 11th, 2001. On a clear Tuesday morning, the world watched in shock as the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center were attacked and ultimately collapsed. Nearly 3,000 lives were lost, and the skyline that had defined New York for decades was forever changed. For a moment, the city stood still, but only for a moment. In the years that followed, New Yorkers rebuilt. A new skyline emerged, led by One World Trade Center, a symbol of remembrance, resilience, and hope. It wasn't just about replacing buildings, it was about proving that the spirit of the city could never be destroyed. Today, New York is home to more than 8 million people and welcomes tens of millions of visitors every year. It remains one of the world's leading centers for finance, media, fashion, technology, art, and culture. From the lights of Times Square to the quiet paths of Central Park, from Wall Street to the Brooklyn waterfront, every corner tells a story shaped by generations of dreamers, builders, and survivors. Yet New York's story is still being written. The city now faces new challenges, from climate change and rising sea levels, to housing affordability and the demands of a rapidly changing economy. Just as previous generations adapted to canals, bridges, skyscrapers, and subways, today's New Yorkers continue searching for the next chapter in the city's remarkable history. It's hard to believe that everything you've seen began with a small trading port of fewer than 80,000 people. The muddy streets became avenues lined with skyscrapers. Horse-drawn wagons gave way to one of the world's busiest subway systems. Wooden docks evolved into one of the planet's most influential financial centers. Over more than 2 centuries, New York didn't simply grow. It reinvented itself again and again. And perhaps that's the city's greatest lesson. Great cities aren't built overnight. They're shaped by bold ideas, relentless ambition, and the determination to keep moving forward, even after setbacks that seem impossible to overcome. The next time you look at the New York skyline, remember that you're not just seeing buildings of steel and glass. You're looking at more than 200 years of human ambition, resilience, and transformation. If you enjoyed this journey through time, subscribe and join us for the next episode. Every week, we'll explore how the world's greatest cities, countries, and civilizations became what they are today. Until then, thank you for watching, and remember, the past isn't gone. It's the foundation beneath every city we see today.